Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joined, as per the usual, by Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, I was going to ask you how you are, and we had an elaborate introduction and everything to this show. In fact, we started to record our Seahawks recap, which we were a little behind on getting to just because, I was at the game yesterday, and we had a little schedule mishap. And, of course, the news drops that Ben Roethlisberger having surgery on his elbow and out for the season, so that's going to kind of supersede some of our reaction to the Seahawks game. Although, you know what, not all necessarily bad. There are some positives and some takeaways from that, but we're going to have to talk about this Ben Roethlisberger thing because it's a pretty big deal too. So a little bit of my favorite word again, plethora of things to speak about today. But before we get to that, Brian, all things considering, how are you doing?
I am living in a world of fantasy. I don't even know what the hell that means. I am. It just feels like, okay, I'll figure it out. I'll get through the day. And hey, it's the beginning of the Mason Rudolph era. What can I say?
It is, and you know what? Man, I don't even know where to go with that. You have Ben's going to go to IR. That's going to open a spot on the roster. You got to assume Devlin Hodges is the first guy to come up to be the backup. I don't know if the Steelers will feel that. I think they feel secure with Rudolph, obviously. Otherwise, they would have brought a veteran in. Mike Tomlin is accustomed to having a veteran quarterback somewhere on the roster. I don't even know who's available at this point. There was Stan Savarin, which he was kind of annoying me with his postgame show yesterday, and Charlie Batch. I don't think they were aware that Landry Jones is signed to the XFL. I think Batch eventually mentioned it, but I think that means he's exclusive to them. That would probably be the first name, as much as people may cringe. Here's a veteran guy that knows, most of the Steelers system. I mean, Randy Fichtner picked up a lot of the same type of stuff that Todd Haley did, and he's at least familiar, you know what I mean, and he's an experienced guy. He'd be somebody that he could at least have a headset or a clipboard or something on the sidelines that may have some valuable input to the team and at least get you through some practices and things of that nature. Otherwise, I'm not sure. I would assume they're going to have to look at somebody. Do you go with just Devlin Duck Hodges? I think that's the worst fear, is like, what's next? But I will say, at least based on, even though it was 28-26 loss against the Seahawks at home, you wish it would have maybe turned out a little different. There were some good individual performances, and I want to say one of those things was Mason Rudolph. I'm going to say, I would say he at least exudes some confidence, or gives you some confidence that the Steelers can maintain a standard. He's not Ben Roethlisberger, but now there's no question marks. Now you know whether or not he's going to be the future and where the Steelers stand. And you know what? They start 0-2. The elbow thing, somebody was reporting or saying that, Ben was experiencing some discomfort in training camp. I don't know that I ever heard or read or otherwise observed that during the preseason, but it would explain. He's had some slow starts before, Brian. We were talking about it in the show that no one's going to hear now about, when he had his complement of weapons with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, and the old gunslinger may not have it. 5 weeks into the 2017 season, throws 5 interceptions against the Jacksonville Jaguars in a very bad home loss, and they were 3-2. And, we were kind of alluding to maybe it's the same kind of slow start. The guy's not playing in the preseason, all of these other things that, compound and kind of snowball into a slow start and lots of ugly September football, not just for the Steelers, also for the Seahawks too, and all around the NFL. So I'm kind of hodgepodging all of that together and trying to, say a lot of things in a short span of time here, but this is major news, and this will impact the Steelers' season. Obviously, we had maybe an inkling that, Ben may not be available over the next few weeks, but we also went back several months ago and said, everyone's going to freak out because the Steelers could end up starting 0-2, and here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So I am, First of all, I want to say this just so I get it out of the way. I'm going to throw a best wishes to Ben. I'm going to throw a thank you for what you have done to Ben. And I'm certainly not hoping for this. But there's a chance that when you talk about season-ending surgery for a guy who's 37, you have to understand that there's a chance that he never suits up again. It's there. Doesn't mean it will happen, and I hope it doesn't, because I don't think this is the best way for Ben to go out. And I would prefer that he go out, on his own terms rather than being forced out. But one of the things you said is 100% correct, in that we are now going to find out whether Mason Rudolph is the future of this franchise. No matter what else happens, it's Mason's team the rest of the year. And if he's the guy, we're going to soon learn that. If he's not the guy, be ready for an ugly season and a top draft pick.
Yeah, and by ugly season, I mean, I look at the schedule, and we were just discussing this too. Going to the West Coast and playing on the West Coast in California, and it's usually not pretty for the Steelers, to be completely honest. But I'm not exactly like just packing it all in just yet. I thought Mason I thought he showed some pretty good promise in just a half of football, his first ever half of football. So you may have some growing pains. You may have, that type of thing with a second year guy. This is gonna be ugly. I guess the prettier thing is, they did let Josh Dobbs go. They traded him because what would happen now if you're flip-flopping between guys that are two different type of quarterbacks? I don't know that there's a whole lot that changes with Mason Rudolph. And even watching for a half of football yesterday, and I made this comment in the back rooms, these weren't vanilla play calls that they were calling out there. I know there's a gadget play, and I was just watching the Bill Cowher Football Life the other day because I wanted to watch the Terry Bradshaw one, but of course I was out and about. I was traveling, and then it wasn't available on this new NFL app that they just threw up on Fire Stick, and it's like I can't find anything on it. It's truly terrible, the interface. And I'm an IT guy, and I'm a tech guy. I come from that background. And I don't understand how to use this thing. So if anybody there is with me, raise your hand. Let me know in the comments section. But I was trying to find, they usually have them on there after they aired, and I couldn't find it. So I watched Cowher's, and it just reminded me of gadget plays and stuff. And I'm like, wow, where has been all, Hines Ward used to throw the ball. Antoine Randall L. used to throw the ball. Jerome Bettis used to throw the football. What has happened to some of these gadget plays? And lo and behold, the flea flicker. And I think that was a huge play. I think that's a huge play to get Mason Rudolph going. I think that was a huge play to get Juju Smith-Schuster going. And we saw that Rudolph's capable. He has an arm. That ball came out quick too, man. And I mean, it's exciting plays like that I think you can rally around. I know you're not ready to have all the bells and whistles and everything on yet. And I pump my brakes a little bit too, but just based on the preseason and his accuracy and most of the downfall really being with Mason Rudolph, that other guys are dropping the ball. He was 63.2 on 19 attempts yesterday. His completion percentage, only 112 yards. He had the 2 touchdowns, and he had the pick, which is one of our turning points with the Seahawks game, just going into that and just, I didn't rewatch the whole thing, but the beginning of that Fox broadcast was talking about Big Ben looking young, doesn't look like he's 37, and he has a lot of confidence in Dante Moncrief, and I think both of those things just flew out the window. They did not age very well in like a 24-hour period. Moncrief was definitely one of the turning points in this loss. It's a 2-point loss. There's a lot of things that you could point to. I think there's 3 specific things, and they're up on the website at steelcityunderground.com that I wrote about as well, and we'll talk about them here. But definitely one of those was Moncrief not squeezing the ball. I've been making the excuse for him, but this excuse isn't valid for him to be on the field, okay? If he has a dislocated finger and he is not healed from that and he cannot squeeze the football, which appeared to be a damn near perfect pass from Mason Rudolph that would have moved the chains, and instead turns into an interception on what? Was that his first pass attempt ever, or his second pass attempt? I mean, come on, man. I mean, I know people are like, oh, well, let's cut him. I'm not ready to cut bait with him yet. He's a veteran player. He's somebody that can definitely be a contributor, but I don't think he's 100% whatsoever, and I don't want to see him on the field if he's not 100%. So I don't want to make the excuse for him necessarily, because even if that is his excuse, or it is the reasoning he's not catching these passes, there's somebody else that needs to be blamed for the reason he's even on the football field. Why are we allowing this guy to be there? Because that play right there turns into 7 points for the Seahawks on a turnaround. It was like a 6-play drive. I think it was another touchdown to Will Disley, the tight end. And this was the reason why. And it's tough here, Brian, because we were talking about so many things that we haven't actually discussed in this part because of the Ben Roethlisberger news. But the time of possession, the 11 and a half minutes more, 35-46 to 24-14 for the Seahawks. It was humid. It was warm. It may not have seemed like it that 82 or whatever it was is warm, but it was hot out there. It really was. The sun, the Western Pennsylvania sun in that stadium, 1 o'clock in September, and even in portions where you get like that, whatever they call the later fall, that's almost like still warm, you know what I mean, into October. I mean, it means that they have to rotate a lot of guys in on defense too. So you're seeing Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt having a fantastic game, having to rotate out for Tyson Alualu, or Javon Hargrave slides over, or you have Dan McCullers come in, and the same thing with the linebackers. You have Anthony Chickillo maybe coming in, and you're moving. You have a lot of moving pieces because guys are getting fatigued due to the offense, pretty much stinking up the joint in at least the first quarter, if not the first half. So, I'm jumping around all over the place here because, this is huge news, and you're thinking about how this is going to impact the season. But right now, the only thing you could go on really is a half of football from Rudolph that we did see. I know you're pumping the brakes on a little bit of that, and I know there's things that got to be fixed on the defense, but as you were saying, there are a lot of good individual performances on the defense, and there are some decent takeaways from this game to think maybe not all hope is lost.
Yeah, let me start with this just because I want to get the positives out of the way. Not Cam. God, I want to say Cam.
You do want to.
I do.
It's
I
the
just
other
want
guy.
to. It's not. Stephon Tuitt, grown-ass man.
Yes.
TJ Watt, grown-ass man. Steven Nelson, glove-ass man.
Yes. I love calling him the glove man. He was all over everyone, and then, we were talking about this. Just the one great catch by DK Metcalf, really. I don't think Nelson's not a liability out there. He's even looking like a cornerback one in some cases. And they tried to pick on him all day, and it wasn't working.
No, people are going to talk about the touchdown that Metcalf caught, but that was on Terrell Edmonds. That was not Steven Nelson. And so, those are the positives that I have. The second positives will be that Mason Rudolph coming in relief, right, with limited work, limited snaps, was at least serviceable. Now that's my brake pumping there. I'm not looking at that performance and saying, yes, praise the Lord. We've got another one. He's a franchise guy. That's the future for certain. I'm not saying that based on that performance. And it's not all his fault. As you mentioned, Moncrief hurt him. The receivers generally hurt him, but they also bailed him out. We talked about the flea flicker. The flea flicker was an underthrown ball. He admits that even in the post-game, interview. He underthrew it somewhat badly. Juju comes back, makes a great adjustment, makes a nice combat catch, so it still ends up a big play. Fantastic. Glad to see it. The second longest pass I think he had was to Deontay Johnson, which was, again, a poorly thrown ball. Outside, Deontay Johnson does some freaky, weird ninja Jedi mind control body movements to get back and catch that ball. And that's great. That's more than half of his yards right there. And this is where I'm going to point out that this is not all his fault. Those are the things that the receivers cleaned up for him, but the receivers are continuing to have issues getting open. We saw it with Ben. We saw it with Mason. When these guys have to scramble around as much as they are scrambling around, it's because nobody's getting open. and that is a continuing issue. Mason, they appeared to make some adjustment because you saw it on the third series when Ben was in there, where they started hitting some quick outs, some quick passes, and we were making movements. And Mason continued that. So, from the standpoint of what I think they're going to end up doing, Mason may be a good fit. I continue to say maybe. I'm not willing to either throw this kid in the trash after a half of football. I'm also not willing to say he's the next coming after a half of football. I'm glad that he looked serviceable. His confidence is good, and I like that. I think there's a lot of positives about his game and hope that this can be something. But remember, franchise quarterbacks are rare, and I'm just not yet convinced that he is one. But we will see, and we're going to see faster than sooner. Or I guess that's the same thing, isn't it? Faster and sooner are sort of the same. We're going to see sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
We're going to, and if you want to take a turn from this, the best thing to come out of this is they're going to know what they have in Mason Rudolph before his rookie contract expires, so that if this season goes heavily south. Because there are other injuries that we have to take into account as well. James Conner being hurt, we don't know the extent of that. Vince Williams being hurt, we don't know the extent of that. You start to take other things into account along with this. If this season goes in the tank, and I'm not saying it will, and it's not, even with Ben out for the season, I'm not ready to pack it in. But if it does go in the tank, we're going to have a very high draft pick. And if we have a very high draft pick, they're going to need to know what to use that draft pick on. And I think they're going to get a good sampling to decide whether this is their quarterback or they need to find another one. And that's the upside of this happening in my mind. And it's not a good upside, but it is the upside.
Well, it's one of those things too. Take a look last year at the Baltimore Ravens. Okay. They end up winning the division, and the Steelers sputtered at the end and kind of shot themselves in the foot too. Ravens could have still been a wild card team regardless, okay? But they made the switch from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson like mid-season. They were 4-5 when they last met the Steelers before the bye week, and then they end up ripping off 6 of the last 7 games. They go 6-1. They finish 10-6. I mean, that's a pretty big turnaround behind a rookie quarterback, and you've got a guy he's been in the system for a year. He appears to be bright. He appears to, I hate to disparage the great name of Landry Jones, but Landry went. Landry, for those who've not been longtime listeners of the show, I defended Landry Jones, and I jokingly call him the GOAT, but. Let's be serious here. He looked like a deer in headlights sometimes. You want to talk about a serviceable backup? I'm going to say he was a serviceable backup. He's not the guy. I would be crapping my pants if I thought, and I would be jokingly like, let's rally behind him. But, I don't really want to see him for more than 2 or 3 games, if at all. And it was fun to see him play, when you already had the season wrapped up and you're playing a stinky Cleveland Browns team in Week 17. Now you got to go from week 3 on with a young kid who many had a first-round grade on. The Steelers moved and got moved into the 3rd round to get, and also a move that Ben Roethlisberger didn't understand at the time or didn't put his seal of approval on. You know what I mean? And now we're going to see if this move actually pays off. They traded up to get Rudolph, and now you got to go ahead with him. And, I understand what you're saying with Deontay Johnson making the catch and Juju making the catch and this and that. These are the things that receivers are, you count on them doing. This is the NFL, and it's the same reason why people are screaming their heads off at Dante Moncrief at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there's more guys. James Washington, they looked like they were on the same page. They looked good together yesterday. Connor, I mean, there was a pass I think that he may have dropped, but Vance McDonald was integrated in this playbook too. And there's a lot of good individual performances. I still thought Terrell Edmonds had a fairly I don't know if I want to say great, but good game. He should have had an interception. That's the other turning point we're going to say about this Seahawks game. I don't understand replay. Replay is supposed to fix obvious mistakes in officiating. When does a defender get to play the ball? A guy on defense, does he get to play the ball? Like, what if he would have come down with an interception there? Was it still going to be defensive pass interference? I mean, Pete Carroll was packing the bags there. They were running a play, and all of a sudden I don't know, they ran a play, and then all of a sudden it's like, did they miss? Somebody red-green colorblind missed the challenge flag somewhere? Like, it was weird. They were just going to run the ball. They may have picked up 2 yards, and they were going to punt. It was 3rd and 20, and all of a sudden that turns into 40-some yards on a overturned replay, defensive pass interference, and that turns into points for the Seahawks too. And I'd be remiss if I don't mention the other one, which we were talking about this. You were saying, because I didn't get a good replay in the stadium of this. I don't even know that they showed a replay of it. It was the penalty on Dan McCullers on the field goal at the beginning of the game, practically. And that turned into a first down, 14-yard penalty, half the distance to the goal for, hitting the long snapper or whatever he hit. And I guess he bumped into him, but like I was saying, it looked kind of ticky-tack, and that was the best. You put the best. I'm giving you the credit here. You had the best phrase for that, saying ticky-tack maybe. I don't know what angle the officials saw on that, but that was a critical play. So you have 3 critical plays in this game that turned into Seahawks points. And had anything gone the other way, despite losing Ben Roethlisberger, despite losing the guy with the green dot on his helmet and doing all the communication in Vince Williams going out early with the hamstring, despite losing Sean Davis and Cam Kelly having to come in, despite all of these other mitigating factors, defensive players being out there forever and everything else, it really boils down to, if one of the plays, the McCullers penalty, the Moncrief Butterfingers play, or this just instant replay call, this is going to kill the NFL, because the instant replay is to fix obvious mistakes. There wasn't anything obvious there to me that constituted defensive pass interference. And in all 3 of these circumstances, the Seahawks scored points, and it makes the defense look like a bunch of doofuses, when in fact I felt for the most part they had done their job. We talked about a lot of great individual performances, and people were packing their bags and leaving Heinz Field, and then all of a sudden Mike Hilton swoops in, and he's been kind of in my doghouse as well, but he comes in and punches the ball right out of Chris Carson's hands, and the Steelers are right back in it. And unfortunately, if they could have contained Russell Wilson on 1 or 2 runs there late in the 4th quarter, they may have gotten the ball back. It wouldn't have made a Cinderella story, to be completely honest, Brian. That's why I wish it really was the National Fixed League. Maybe not in our favor, I guess, but it would have been really nice to see Rudolph get him into field goal range, and then Chris Boswell, the guy who couldn't hit the side of a barn last year, get the game-winning field goal there. That would have been really cool, but it did not. The storyline did not work out that way, unfortunately. But there's all of these different things. That's the real reason why I don't feel like you could put both of these games side by side, even with a backup quarterback coming in. It wasn't like the Steelers' offense was completely dysfunctional at that point. They were actually doing, did I say defense or did I say offense? The offense wasn't dysfunctional at that point. If anything, it looked like they were doing better than they were when Ben was in the game.
Yeah, I want to make one correction. While it may have looked like Mike Hilton punched that ball out, he was nowhere near the ball. It was just a mishandled fumble. But the mishandling may have been caused by the fact that he penetrated.
Oh, he was right there. He was breathing.
I'll give him the credit. Yeah, he absolutely penetrated. And that may have caused them, to be able to mismanage the snap, but he didn't punch that ball out.
Sure.
And I agree, because I agree with you. Mike Hilton hasn't shown up much this season, actually. And the bottom line here is that was still a nice play from him. He's still quick to get in the backfield, and that's great. I feel like it's going to be an interesting. I don't even want to say next week is a make or break kind of game. There is no comparison between this game and the Patriots game. In the Patriots game, the Steelers just looked foolish. They were ill prepared. It was a butt whipping of the first degree. Yeah, there's no getting around it.
Let's just forget it happened.
Yeah, I don't even remember it now. This game was more disturbing in some ways because they had chances to win, and their own errors in many ways caused those chances to falter. Now, I got to go back to this, and here's my hashtag. I'm going to start my hashtag the ref stinks rant.
Yes.
I'm going to start this with the McCullers play. Yes, it was ticky-tack. I don't actually fault them for throwing that flag in in the press conference, Tomlin said, look, McCullers made contact with the head and shoulders of the center. You're not allowed to do that. He didn't intend to make contact with the head and shoulder of the centers. He wasn't lined up. And as you pointed out, the center may have actually moved to block him, but it's a penalty. So I get that. I'm not going to argue with them on it. What I will argue with them on is that the snap didn't take place.
Oh, yes.
Until at least 2 seconds after the delay of game should have been thrown. And how many times do the refs need to go back to flippity beep, beep, beep school to learn how to call a damn delay a game? Good heavens. There's certain things that, you shouldn't be allowed to wear the uniform if you don't understand. One of them is if the clock goes to 0, you throw a flag because they haven't snapped the ball yet. Now, had they done that, had there been a fair officiation of the delay of game there, and there was another one later in the game, by the way, so this isn't the only delay of game that screwed them up. If they had called that, McCullers' penalty is nullified, doesn't matter, and they end up kicking the field goal, and maybe they miss it because they made it the first time. So, again, that's 4 points. Guess what? 4-point swing, Steelers win. So,
well, yeah, you're right.
That's a big change. Then we can go on to this craziness of the review rule. And I look, Al Riveron must just get, I don't want to say dirty words. I'll just say very excited the minute he knows he gets to review something that's against the Steelers because he never does it well. And he wants to do it. It feels spiteful because the whole point of this review was to eliminate egregious pass interference misses like the one that occurred in the Rams-Saints game in the playoffs last season. By no stretch of the imagination was what went on with Terrell Edmunds a egregious miss of a pass interference. First of all, ball is thrown behind the receiver. Mm-hmm. When a ball is thrown behind the receiver that way, you cannot fault the defender for being there. Now the receiver has to reach in the wrong direction. And I'm sorry, you're not allowed to give them a 5-foot cone around a 5-foot bubble around every receiver, and nobody can be within this range in case the quarterback throws the ball above him, behind him, to the left, to the right, so that he has a chance. No. And Terrell Edmunds, as you said, has as much right to that ball as the receiver. If he comes down with it, in my mind, that's just a great play on the ball, and there's no DPI. And if that's the case, there should have been no DPI. It was a ridiculous overturn, a complete illegitimizing of this rule and what everybody was afraid was going to happen when this rule went into place. It was that bad. The refs stink. They continue to stink. I don't even want to talk about them anymore because they're horrible, and we should have no refs and just have anarchy, damn it.
Sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it's just Colin Dunlap was just talking about this. He said, do you talk about the officials as much if there wasn't replay? I mean, it's just what all it is. I mean, yeah, you do, but I think everyone accepted that referees are human and these are mistakes happen on the field. Except they didn't accept that, and this is a $1 billion industry and all these things on the line with every little play that can possibly, we named 3 of them that could have determined the outcome of the game. And, that's the biggest problem. We were talking about that, the delay of game. There's certain things that if they happen, then you should call them. And I know this is what the officials were seeing on that McCullers thing. Whoever called it from whatever angle just saw what they felt was contact. They don't know if Dan initiates that contact or Dan's trying to, shoot the gap there right next to the long snapper, center, whatever the heck you want to call them. They didn't even snap the ball, though. It was so ridiculous. And we saw Jason Myers miss a field goal, actually, in the game, too. So, I mean, it's within the realm of plausibility. I don't want to say coulda, woulda, shoulda. I mean, the Steelers, they still had their opportunities to close out this game. And, we were talking about even some of the we were talking about getting off the field on third downs. And the efficiency of the Seahawks was only 5 of 13, 38%. They weren't exactly great, and they had the 4th down conversion at the very end, which was a 4th and 1, and I didn't feel good that they were going to stop that anyways. And Seattle's a run-first team anyways, you know what I mean? That's the reason you didn't really see Wilson, scrambling a whole lot throughout the game, and it wasn't really available to him until the very end. And it's another, darned if you do, darned if you don't situation is, how many years have we heard, play man, play man, play man, stop playing zone, blah, 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 stuff like that. And now they play man, and guess what? It leaves nobody accountable for Russell Wilson in that situation near the end, and he nearly picks up the first down on third down anyways. I just thought, Pete Carroll didn't have anything to lose on that challenge with the Terrell Edmonds play. If he, it's third and whatever, he's going to challenge it. If he loses a timeout or loses a challenge or whatever, what's the worst case scenario? They're in a deep hole. And that's the thing that sucks the most, is because the momentum at that point was totally in the Steelers' favor. And then it just went pew, like letting the air out of the balloon. And I was just, man, the bad news has really got me flustered, and I'm still, trying to get over what I was and process everything from yesterday. And we were talking about a lot of the individual performances on defense, and I think the only thing that really seems like a lot of people are like, oh, well, fire Keith Butler. I can't go on social media. I can't go on Facebook. I can't go on Twitter because I just can't read some of this stuff because I want to respond to it. I want to react to it. I had people that were sitting around me yesterday that aren't even aware of rules. For example, like Devin Bush running backwards on the return, by the way, on that fumble, and then he goes and he fumbles like right around the pylon, but they were calling him out of bounds. And even you step out of bounds, if you're out of bounds, you're standing out of bounds and you touch a football that's inbounds, the play's dead. And I had somebody arguing about that, and it's like, well, fire Keith Butler, trade for a safety. That's the popular one, which that noise is going to be shut down pretty quick with the Ben news, but. Let's visit that in a few minutes, Brian, because we were talking about that too. Yeah, we don't want to give up a first-round draft pick. Call us crazy, but anyway, it's just things like that. Like, what's Keith Butler going to do if you put your players in the best position that they can? And you're doing certain things, and somebody blows a doesn't do. I don't even want to say doesn't do their job. They do what they do to the best of their ability, but the other guy wins over one on you. This is the same thing. The flea flicker with Mason Rudolph. You think the Seahawks shouldn't have been aware, had somebody covering Juju. This guy shouldn't be beat. This is why they're pro football players. You know what I mean? This is how you get highlights, because everyone's trying to outdo the other person, and it's sometimes going to work in your favor, and sometimes it's not. I think the biggest thing was the time of possession, and I think the time of possession still rests a lot. See if you agree with me here. It rests a lot on the offense being able to have time to actually have any kind of meaningful drives. And when that doesn't happen early, that second quarter, to me, resembled a lot of the Patriots game right over again, because it just seemed like the Steelers didn't have the ball for very long. In the second quarter, 3 minutes and 28 seconds. It's in just about 4 minutes in the first quarter too. They didn't have a lot going on. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that backwards. It was about. Let me bring that back. It was about 4 minutes of the second quarter. There wasn't any scoring in the first quarter, so there's nothing here on the when it comes to some of the possession there. But it's just the possession was just it was very one-sided for a very long time, and that's not going to help your defense. And I don't think that necessarily, as much as we want to believe the standard's the standard, we knew going in that safety was maybe going to be a weakness. I think we were expecting we weren't anticipating Cam Kelly to be a starter. We were anticipating Cam Kelly to be that guy that roams around in the middle of the field and kind of is one of these hybrid dimebacker types to assist in coverage, and that didn't really happen. I felt Mike Hilton at times has been off of his game as a nickel corner as well. Then you see Cam Sutton kind of come in there for Hilton in a few, or even on the field at the same time with Hilton at some circumstances. And I think he deserves a grown-ass man, too, for those two plays back-to-back that he made. There's definitely a lot of flashes here. Devin Bush is going to grow and learn. Mark Barron is still new in this system. We got to see where the other injuries are, because it is concerning that Sean Davis is hurt. That doesn't, give you a whole lot of confidence when they got to go on the road and play in San Francisco. And San Francisco has been putting up points, but as I said, look at who they've been playing too. You know what I mean? It was Tampa Bay and Cincinnati. Not necessarily the highest caliber, teams in the league necessarily. I think there's still an opportunity for the Steelers to fix this. I think this is, the Ben Roethlisberger news is definitely going to put a damper on not only everyone's expectations from Vegas to the fans sitting at home playing Monday morning quarterback, but as far as the team, I think the team's going to rally, and they're going to rally behind him. They're going to rally behind the fact that their season is in jeopardy. That's the word that you used best. It's not necessarily panic mode, but I'm just hoping that people aren't thinking all of a sudden, well, they could just be the Dolphins and tank the season.
No, I don't think that should be in your playbook right now. Tanking the season seems like a bad idea. Look, I don't believe in tanking the season, period, whether you're tanking it because you really have no hope or not. So what those lovely Dolphins are doing, I find to be silly. I don't know. I don't even want to call them Dolphins. I posted this out yesterday. I'm not even on this team, and I want to be traded from them. I don't think they should be. They should be called the Minnows, because it's disparaging the good name of what was once a fine franchise. The teams that they are putting out on the field. I'm sorry if any Dolphin fans are offended by that, but your team stinks, and that's coming from guys who are 0-2.
Yes,
look. Here's what they've got to look forward to next week, and I'm sure that some of our tight end attracted individuals back in the SEU backrooms, yeah, Eric, I'm talking about you, my friend, are going to be all a Twitter, because George Kittle is going to be on the field with them, and they are all in love with George Kittle. The tight ends are a concern because they've been a concern. Tight end ate him up yesterday. Tight end ate him up in New, well, I guess the tight end didn't really eat him up in New England because there really wasn't one. But tight ends continue to be a problem for them. I think that will improve as Devin Bush starts to get a little better and Mark Barron starts to get a little more comfortable, with coverage. I mean, but I think the first touchdown to Disley, Bush actually was close. He was right there, but he's much smaller, and he just wasn't able to get the play. Again, as you said, sometimes the other guys make plays. They're paid too. So, when that happens, you just kind of tip your hat to him and say, damn, made a nice play. Other times there's mistakes, and that's all those things have to be cleaned up. Immediately following the game, I was much more despondent than I am at this point in time, even with the Ben news. Because I feel like there is some promise in the sense of getting a chance. What you talked about rallying around the young guy, I think will be true. I think everybody's going to be just ramped up just a little bit more because they know they've got an inexperienced quarterback, and they're going to do whatever they can to help this kid out. From the offensive line, who's going to take it as their mission to make sure this guy stays healthy, because as much as people love him, if we end up with Duck Dynasty as the starting quarterback, we're in deep doo-doo.
Hey, I want to say as much of that too. I'm not as down on him as some others, but I don't think it'll be pretty. We'll say that much.
Yeah, no, I don't hate the kid. I think he's got a lot of moxie. I just don't think he's a starting NFL quarterback.
Bingo.
And yeah, it's different when you're playing in the third quarter and fourth quarter of preseason games than when you're starting. So we will see. I just don't know what they're going to do in that situation. So I'm sure everybody's going to be amped up to keep Mason Rudolph upright. They're going to do their best to find ways to help him. They're going to make sure that they put him in the best situations to try and be successful. And it's going to be, again, as I said, we're going to learn whether Mason Rudolph is the face of the franchise moving forward or not. And I will say this again. I hope Ben comes back. I hope he does his recovery. I hope he gets a chance to come back. And I hope that he decides he wants to try and play again, because I'd like to see Ben be able to retire on his own terms rather than being forced out by an injury. But there is a little bit of, serendipity, deja vu here when we remember that Ben Roethlisberger came in for an injured Tommy Maddox who hurt his, can you remember?
Elbow,
and never looked back. So
yeah,
I'm just saying that was 16 years ago. And regardless of how, the freakazoid, what'd somebody call him today? The vampire that lives in New England? Tom Brady keeps going. At some point when you start to be 37 and you've taken the kind of hits that Ben Roethlisberger has over his career and the kind of damage his body has sustained over his career, even though it's been much better for the past 4 or 5 seasons, it still accumulates and it becomes harder to bounce back from things. And like I said, I wish him nothing but the best. I thank him for 16 years of completely fantastic football, and look forward to seeing him go into the Hall of Fame. But even more so, I hope he comes back, and I look forward to seeing him have another season where he can go out on his own terms. I don't know where we're going from here. There's now such a big question mark, but we're going to find the answers, and so we will see. We will see how the season goes moving forward, and it'll be a much different conversation every week because we don't have history of knowing what Ben does or doesn't do. We're going to be talking about a guy, I don't know what the heck he's going to do.
Yeah, and we'll be previewing some of that. I'm still, like I said, it's just a small sample size, but the defense got to Russell Wilson 4 times yesterday. They still look like the defense that's capable of putting on the pressure. Maybe some adjustments late in the game. They just weren't quite there, or whatever be the case. The offense needs to get moving, and that was where, once again, how many touches did we have for the running backs yesterday, Brian? 15. Right? Yeah. You had one great run by Benny Snell. You also had a good fake by Benny Snell, where on the one Vance McDonald touchdown from Mason Rudolph. And I thought the poise of Rudolph in those situations. He got flushed out of the pocket early. He was maybe a little more erratic. He got rid of the ball instead of just holding on to it. Ben looked very hesitant too in that game, and I don't know. Maybe he did feel something lingering because his completion percentage was absolutely just it was abnormal. He was 57.45 last week in New England. He was 53.33 in this game. Ben is like consistently a 60-some% guy. This is, there was a uncharacteristic for him,
Yeah, there was a point after the injury happened. There were a couple balls. One he threw right into the ground.
Yeah.
And you could tell from that point on, he wasn't going to get any zip on the ball. And what he was able to do was less than what he normally does. He tried to gut it out, but when he came out of the game, you could tell something was really bothering him. And I'm flipping the bird at all the people who are like the drama queen. Look, you're not a drama queen when you go out for season-ending surgery. So Deion Sanders, you can kiss my butt.
Yeah, it would even be acceptable to say you could kiss your ass, Brian, because
that's true. We have grown-ass men, so Deion Sanders, pucker up and kiss my ass.
I agree, man. And when you're done with Brian, you could join. I'll be right in line. I'll drop trowel. So that's just so. I don't like to say things to be sensational or to get the attention that guys like Deion Sanders need, but now that you reminded me, it's just ridiculous. This will be a storyline. This is going to be a storyline going forward. What's going to go on with the Steelers? I guess we're going to have to see how they play in San Francisco, and hopefully, the defense. I really felt like this team was starting to come around where the defense was once again part of the conversation is going to keep them in games. And they're going to have to. And I do believe if you're going to put, a stamp or a seal on what's happened through 2 weeks already, they played 2 good football teams with 2 good, long-tenured, Super Bowl winning coaches. You're not facing that in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. I really don't know who Jimmy Garoppolo is at this point. I don't like any of their receivers. They have an okay running game. I don't necessarily, think that their backs are great. You look ahead to week 4. We know what the Cincinnati Bengals have been stinketh so far. That's a Monday night game at home. You get the Ravens at home as well. We'll see how the Ravens fare in their next couple of games to see where they are. And then right before the bye week, you got to go out to L.A. and you got to play the Chargers, who are losing players left and right too. And they still have another guy that's a running back that is sitting out and not playing. There's a lot of moving parts all around the league to just say after 2 weeks and even losing Ben, let's just say the Steelers didn't have Ben. And they were one of these teams. 5 teams draft a quarterback in the first round last year, trying to improve their fortunes. We know Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, et cetera, et cetera. Mason Rudolph was part of that conversation. And it shouldn't be overlooked because this isn't a guy that you're throwing a 4th-round dart at like Josh Dobbs or Landry Jones. This was a guy who fell because there were a lot of other highly touted quarterbacks within the same class. This isn't a guy that just goes, a few rounds deeper. And I mean, this has happened. Russell Wilson's was a 3rd-round pick. Guys like that. It doesn't happen often, but it's something that shouldn't be necessarily overlooked or discounted. And I still feel like, hey, he was fairly accurate. He's demonstrated he could throw a deep ball. We saw some of his film. Some of it was kind of Ben-like. Now we get to see what's going on here. And this is like, unfortunately for this season, this could be a make or break. I'm not gonna like overlook that either. But this could also be an opportunity for the Steelers, as you said earlier, to see what they have going forward. And if, in fact, they end up having a bad season and a higher first-round pick, that's not something that they typically have. They could add another, crown jewel to this team and improve it even more, even if Big Ben does return, or you see if, hey, you know what, Rudolph, he's got the stuff, he's got the goods, he's the real deal, and now you're feeling a little better about the future of the Steelers franchise. And if it isn't so good this year, hey, it's one bad year. A lot of teams suffer for decades. They could begin to look at the quarterback process again. They're not just stuck with it and, sticking with this kid post Ben, a few years down the road. And then you're miserable constantly looking for a quarterback like some of these teams do. So that's one thing. The other thing is now for the Miami Dolphins and looking to ship off Minkah Fitzpatrick, which would be a tremendous acquisition for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I am not going to discount that whatsoever. That's a fabulous idea. I would love to have him on the defense. The asking price, now when you're looking at they're asking for a first-round pick, well, if you think you're a playoff contender and you're a lower first-round pick, I still don't like the idea of a first-round pick either. We have also debated even a 2nd-round pick or some other things. I know everybody else wants a package. A lot of other guys you feel that are expendable on the roster that offer zero value to the Dolphins in a trade for a guy that's, a Pro Bowl guy. He's still young. He's still on a rookie contract with a potential 5th-year option. Those things are all in other words, cheap contract. Those things are all very appealing to me, especially when you have Sean Davis in a contract year. You have Cam Kelly maybe not necessarily being up to snuff to where we would want him to be the starting free safety. But now you look at it as if they would have made this deal and then Ben goes on the shelf and you finish the year like, 4-12 and you're picking in the top 10, that's a very expensive price tag versus where you think you're a postseason contender giving up a 1. And I don't like it either way. So while I would like to add him on the roster, I just don't think the Steelers are a team that's willing to budge on said asking price. They've never historically ever been a team to do that. I would have liked that in an all-in win now mode, perhaps, but we're going to mortgage the future. And now we get to see what Rudolph, if he is or isn't, and if he isn't, there may be a quarterback out there in next year's draft in the top 10 that now Rudolph is looking over his shoulder the same way Josh Dobbs was.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple other things I gotta yell out about because of the Minkah Fitzpatrick or the Minkah, whatever his name is. I can't remember now. Minkah issue. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I would love to have the guy on the Steelers for the right price. The right price is not a number 1 pick. The right price was not a number 1 pick before your starting quarterback went down for the season, and it sure as heck ain't the right pick now.
Yeah.
The price is too high. And, if they could get him for a package of a 2 and next year's 3 or something, and I think that's too high, to be quite honest. But if they can find a way to make it work, I'm all for it. But I don't think that they will. We'll see. Somebody's going to give up something more. But it would be a great addition. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm not against the addition. I'm against the addition at too high a price. I also got to point out there were people screaming about Chicolo's misplay yesterday who were saying, go back and sign Tuzar Skipper and put him on. If Skipper was still on the 53, he would have been inactive. I'm just letting you know. He wouldn't have been able to be played anyway. He'd have been inactive. And we can't go sign him because the Giants did.
Not available.
Even if we wanted to now, it's not an option anymore. So keep up, man. There's a lot of work that now needs to be done. I will say this for the Fire Tomlin crowd that's out there. I'm not with you. But he has not been this has not been Mike Tomlin's finest season thus far. I do not feel like they had a great way to adjust. I felt like they had a decent game plan going into the beginning of the game. Let me say that. The defensive side of the ball had a good game plan. They put Wilson on the ground 4 times in the first half. My issue, and this has been an issue that goes on a long time, is after that, when the adjustments were made from the Seahawks to manage this, one of those adjustments, I think, was putting some money in the rest pockets to say, look, our right tackle stinks. Could you please stop calling holding on him?
Oh, yeah.
Because, my God, every single play, they could have called holding on that guy, either on Tuitt or TJ Watt. It was blatant at times, ticky-tack at others, but could have been called. And I know you can call holding on every play, but there's a difference between borderline holding and are you kidding me?
Well, let me interject. Why doesn't TJ get the same amount of respect as Khalil Mack? In that game, the Bears and the Broncos from yesterday, who was tasked with, I can't remember his name, was tasked with basically blocking Khalil Mack and couldn't, was called for 5 holding penalties in that game. He could not do it. And you know what? It's not like Khalil Mack has he had any more sacks than TJ Watt? He's almost like statistically the same guy, but for whatever reason, I guess maybe because he has a really rich contract, is that he gets more attention. I understand he's been around a little bit longer too, but 12.5 sacks and TJ had 13 last year. You know what I mean? And I know he's done it longer, but I'm just saying you got to recognize, TJ's a star too, and maybe James Harrison got that respect back in the day. So, that does spit in my face, and I kind of forgot about that. And I think that's important to say here, Brian, as I let you close out your thoughts here, is if there's anything that we missed or forgot about, I think we'll have another show in the middle of the week, because the Ben Roethlisberger news just caught us in the middle. We already had about 20 minutes in, and we scrapped the Seahawks show that we were doing. We were already in the process of doing it, and the news dropped. So our apologies if there's something we missed or overlooked. It isn't because we may not think that or feel the same way you do. It's just more or less we can't remember if we already discussed it on this recording of the episode as opposed to the one we were originally working on, because as soon as the Ben thing, you were stumbling over your words, and I'm just there like, I was frozen, and I'm like, okay, I forget what the heck we were talking about, but I think we need to start over with the Ben Roethlisberger news. So we'll be back around for sure, and we'll have the pregame stuff with the San Francisco 49ers as usual too, and some of our other programming through the week. But yeah, go ahead. Any of your other closing thoughts here, Brian, that you can remember?
That I can remember now? Look, I just feel like we'll see. There's no doubt that the jury is still out on Mason Rudolph. He's looked sharp in preseason games. He looked okay yesterday. But there are things I like I said. I think, we will see how the season moves forward now. There are things that need to be addressed out, whether Ben was going to be the quarterback or Mason's going to be the quarterback. There are other things that need to be addressed and cleaned up, plenty of them. But we will see. This will be an interesting. I think I started talking about Tomlin too. Let me just say this. Tomlin and the coaching staff needs to do a better job, especially of adjusting after somebody figures out what you're doing, and puts a stop to it. They need to find a way to handle things better in the second half of games. I'm not on the fire anybody bandwagon yet, and I don't tend to be that reactionary anyway. But at the end of the season, we will see what happens if they don't figure out a way to right the ship. And I, considering the type of schedule they have, this could certainly end up being Tomlin's first losing season, with considering that he's now got a inexperienced quarterback taking over for his Super Bowl winning quarterback. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm not ready to give up on the season yet. I'm not ready to give up on the division yet, although Vegas dropped the odds on the Steelers winning the division as soon as Ben's news came out, from whatever it was to 16-1, which I think is behind both the Ravens and the Browns now. And up to that point, they had been the odds-on favorite to win the division. Now they're not. We will see. We will see what happens. Don't give up the ship yet. Go get your panic attack out of the way, and let's come back and see what next Sunday has in store for us.
Yeah, and you know what? I will say this much. I'm hoping there isn't the James Conner injury probably has me a little concerned too. I think they could still get by. Yeah. I think the real reason I may sound bullish still on the Steelers is not just the offense, but it's the offensive line. Let's face it. You got 3 Pro Bowl guys, all-pro guys that are anchoring it. They are keeping quarterbacks upright. Ben's only been touched twice all season. Rudolph was not touched at all. And very little when it comes to breakdowns and things of that nature. I think they're capable of pass blocking. I think they're capable of run blocking. That means if Jalen Samuels or Benny Snell has to come in, we've seen some success with those guys too. It's going to work. You got some younger receivers still trying to cut their teeth. You were hoping Dante Moncrief would have been that veteran anchor and been able to do something, and it's not happening. Johnny Holton looks great on special teams. That's where I want to see him. To be completely honest, I don't want to see him out there. I need to see more of Deontay Johnson. I need to see more of James Washington. And when those guys, I think, start to get moving, even Ryan Switzer to some degree, but we know what his role is in the offense. He's a very specific kind of role player coming out of the slot. You got Vance McDonald getting a little bit of uptick. I think this is going to help Juju Smith-Schuster in the long run too. And I think this will help support Mason Rudolph. And that's the reason why I'm not necessarily, just putting everything in the toilet. What they can't do is, though, they can't have like a really bad offensive game plan going into San Francisco and have like 2 3-and-outs to start the game, because that'll immediately spell doom. You get the offense out there. It's still, I know it's more in Northern California, but you're still dealing with some warmer weather. You're dealing with adjustments going to the West Coast and things of that nature. So we'll be talking about that here in the near future. And again, I apologize, folks, if it seems like we were jumping around all over. We had a format, and I mean, that literally, we're usually the least prepared team, broadcast team, but we really weren't prepared. We were thinking, we'll hear some news about this in the middle of the week. We'll get some notes together. We could research some stats and things like that. The best I could tell you is that Mike Tomlin, this isn't like Mike McCarthy with the Green Bay Packers, I don't think, whenever they lost Aaron Rodgers and they weren't able to, keep going. Tomlin's done this with, the likes of Charlie Batch, Dennis Dixon, Byron Leftwich, Landry Jones, Michael Vick, and at times painful, yes, but they've been able to overcome it with those odds. And, I have my own thoughts on Mason Rudolph and thinking that this may not be as, I don't want to downgrade them as much as I would with some of those other guys. So, and we'll see what happens with Landry Jones. I don't know how this XFL contract thing is, but, I think they will be looking for, he's contracted to the XFL, but, who else are you going to go out there and get? I don't even know who else is still available. Even Josh McCown re-signed, he's back to playing football again. Who do you pull out there? You know what I mean? It's like, Mark Sanchez is retired. I wouldn't have wanted him anyways. Matt Castle, guys like that, it just, that's not going to work out so well. And Landry's a guy that's already been there, and you kind of know what you're dealing with there. So, it's the devil you know or the devil you don't. As much as I like the joke, or, you may not be, overly optimistic on that. I don't think it would be the worst case scenario if that contract isn't put him in a situation where he can't sign with an NFL team.
Yeah, look, This is, if you want a bright point to look at here, this should also be James Washington's time to shine. Now you're talking about a duo that played together in college. That doesn't happen very often at the pro level, having guys who played together at the college level, when you're talking about a quarterback and receiver duo, also come to the pros and get a chance to play together. They have familiarity. They have chemistry. As much as I like Dante Moncrief, even though I don't like him right at this moment because I'm annoyed with him, and even though I don't know that it's all his fault because of the fingers issue, in which case, again, I'm going to go back to the Tomlin issue. He shouldn't be out there. But this should be James Washington's time to shine as well. That connection needs to be taken advantage of. You want to talk about doing what you can to make a guy feel comfortable, put a receiver out there that he knows how to play with.
Yeah, I agree with that highly. And I was just trying to see who else is out there, but I'm not getting a very, is Tyrod Taylor still available? I'm not even sure. I'm trying to think of who's actually signed in other places, but some of the guys that were available this offseason were like Nick Foles and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And
a name that's coming up. I'm just telling you.
Go ahead. Throw it out there.
You know it's going to come up. CK. I'm not saying he's a good fit. I'm just saying it's going to come up. Colin Kaepernick is going to come up.
Yeah.
Get ready for it. It's going to be all week long.
It will be, and it's like, you get guys, Brogan Roback was originally coming into camp, and people will be making that argument about, there's guys that haven't played football for a long time. There's going to be people talking about Charlie Batch coming back, so you know what I mean? There's so much nonsense that's going to be going on just because... but you know what? This is a different situation. We're talking about signing a backup when the backup's coming in for your Hall of Fame quarterback that just went out for the season. This is a completely different script than what we're used to. So I think that does bode well for what we believe will happen with Mason Rudolph. But alas, we're all over the place. I think it's time to head out of here, Brian. Thanks once again for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here as always with my brother from another mother. And, it's going to be exciting times, man.
It is. It's going to be very interesting times. I'm going to be looking to purchase my number 2 Mason Rudolph jersey here already. So we're going. I'm going to heavily invest in this because what else can you do? I'm going to follow and support my team, whether they're winners or losers, regardless. So I'm not one of these bandwagon people that showed up, cheering the Seahawks only a few years ago. I had to get the shot in eventually. So
harsh.
Yeah, I know. Cruel and mean. But anyways, especially when I love Russell Wilson. So, but anyways, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave us a review if you're capable of doing that as well. And until next time, we encourage all of our listeners to be safe, be good, don't panic, don't overreact, don't do anything dumb on social media that gets you banned, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.